It's Sunday afternoon at my grandparents' house. My dad and I are kind of sitting lazily at the kitchen table, eating the last of the tin peaches and custard. It's a dessert to this day both of us absolutely love. In between bites, my dad is kind of looking around his childhood home and reminiscing. He notices, out of the corner of his eye, something that's been hiding in plain sight. It probably hasn't moved for the last 30 to 40 years. It's this beautiful, old-school wooden radio. At the sight of it, a flood of emotion washes over his face. He puts his spoon down, turns to me, and begins telling me about how him and his entire family would crowd around this radio at the introductory tune of the news to listen to this highly accredited news anchor every evening. He paused then, breathed deeply. The look of nostalgia in his eyes disappeared. It was replaced by a mix of sadness and determination. You see, this fond memory soon turned into a lesson. Because when he left his community, he realized then just how much the news anchor, which the majority of the white community was listening to, had failed to accurately depict the full nature of racial discrimination happening in South Africa at the time. Apartheid. He underpinned in this story the importance of diversifying perspectives and the value of learning directly from communities outside of our own. Now, fast forward 5 years later, and I find myself looking at diversified perspectives for a living. As a social media intelligence specialist, I look at what people are Googling on, search, but also what communities are posting across forums and blogs and, most importantly, social networks, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Now, I say social media, and I can see red flags are going up. There is so much research being done lately about how addictive social media is and how comparative it can be. But in my job, I'm reminded time and time again about the benefits of social media. I've learned that it's not social media in its entirety that's bad. It's also a place with low access barriers, low privilege barriers, payment barriers, and location barriers. It's a place of belonging. Communities, they grow, they shrink, they challenge, they come together, but most importantly, they educate. You see, I've learned that on social media, we can hear not only from one news anchor or one radio host, but directly from a multitude of communities behind the news story. And so I stand here, possibly becoming every parent's, partner's, teacher's, and some employer's worst nightmare. Because I'm here to tell you to stay on social media, but I'm also going to challenge the way that we use it. Can everyone please take their hands and put them in their laps? Pop your right hand underneath. Use your right thumb to imitate this flick. How weirdly natural does it feel, right? The pace of it, the motion. Could you do it for another 2 hours and 25 minutes? Because if you can, according to Hootsuite, you will have met the global daily average time spent on social media. But none of us here would have learned much more. You see, I've learned doing this, that the intuitive use of social media is not necessarily the best use of social media for society. I was thinking the other day that almost everything that we use or buy has a user manual or a set of lengthy, complicated instructions. But social media, something which 4.7 billion people use, doesn't have one. And maybe that's why the costs of social media are so far outweighing the benefits. So let's build one. Let's build a user manual. It doesn't have to be a long set of complicated instructions. In fact, from my job, I know that there are only really 3. The first is to hack your algorithm. Now, the platform naturally serves us what suits us. This is like my dad and people in his community listening to one radio host 50 years ago. When I was 6, I was taught an unforgettable saying in the event of me being on fire. Stop, drop, and roll. I'm sure some of you might have heard it. I can see the smiles. Today, I'd like to introduce you to stop, drop, the scroll. When the feed gets overwhelming, the place where addiction and comparison lives, head over to the search and let's learn. Let's learn from communities outside of our bubble. Let's purposely seek accounts, content, hashtags that contradict our own views. If you're a millennial, search for content from Gen Z. If you identify as male, search for content from people who identify as female or non-binary. If you're a conservative, search for content from liberals and vice versa. Now, in the case of perspectives contradicting your own views, don't get aggressive. Get curious. The point of this user manual is to help society, not divide us. Hacking your algorithm not only contextualizes progress, but it also prevents confirmation bias. Remember, first instruction, hack your algorithm. Now, the second instruction is to safely share and responsibly question information. 2 weeks ago, I was sitting at a coffee shop with a friend, and she gasped. She showed me her phone. The Instagram post read, "Look how many people in Russia are searching for how to break an arm in order to get out of combat." Now, this is in case of the Ukraine war. And if I showed you this graph, at first glance, you would agree. But there are really two ambiguities here. The first is around how many people are actually searching. The data shown here is Google Trends data, so it shows relative interest over time. 0 is the minimum interest in that time period, and 100 is the maximum interest within that time period. But we have no idea how many people are actually searching at that max point. Is it hundreds, or thousands, or millions? Now, I looked at the back end, and there are 2,400 searches within that month. That's 0.00004% of the male Russian population aged 19 and above. The second ambiguity is around whose arm is being broken. Now, the search is how to break an arm. Is it my arm, so that I don't have to go to combat? Or is it your arm, in the case of self-defense? Knowing these two ambiguities, would you still like and share this piece of content? You might not have access to the tools that I do, but every person sitting in this room has access to the comments. And anytime you see a bold or provocative statement, before you share it online or even at the dinner table, head to the comments and ask for the source of the data, but also the methodology for getting to that conclusion. Remember, safely share and responsibly question information. The final instruction is to go beyond the hashtag. To date, from the tools I have access to, there are 43.1 million mentions of the hashtag #MeToo. But 50% of those mentions are from 2018. Social media does an unbelievable job at creating awareness, but what then, right? We need to maintain our digital action with some sort of real-world impact. Stop, drop the scroll, and head over to the search. Search for one of the thousands and thousands and thousands of organizations that have a presence on social media. Ask yourself, can I donate time, money, or connect them with sponsors? Remember, maintain your digital action with real-world impact. Go beyond the hashtag. Now that you know these 3 instructions, the question is, where do we start, right? How do we kickstart the learning? Ask yourself, what's on my mind? Is it the war in Ukraine? Or is it AI with something like ChatGPT? Is it careers or maybe even relationships? All of it is available to you on social media. In fact, on TikTok, the learning has already begun. The education community is sharing content under the hashtag StudyTalk. Now, StudyTalk has 6 billion views. 6 billion. The biggest concert of all time had 3.5 million people there. Rod Stewart would have had to have sung Forever Young to this audience 1,771 times in order to reach the same number of views that StudyTalk has. We have these learnings at our fingertips, but to access them, we need to stop doing this and start using the user manual. Hack your algorithm, safely share and responsibly question information, and finally, go beyond the hashtag. 5 years ago, my dad taught me a very important lesson. The importance of diversifying perspectives and the value of learning directly from communities outside of our own. And we can all do this via something we so often dismiss as a waste of time: social media. But social media doesn't need to be a waste. All we need to do is to use the user manual, to follow those 3 instructions, to head over to the search, and to stop, drop the scroll.